go.
All right. I'd like to call this meeting the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Staff, are you the only staff today, Stephanie? Okay, so swear the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do. Stephanie Hansen.
Okay, thank you. Call roll, please.
Chris? Mr. Manfred?
Present.
Mr. Smansky?
Present.
Mr. Way?
Present.
We have four.
Okay. Everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting. Any additions or corrections, the same? If not, I make a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes as standing. Call roll, please.
Mr. Fergus?
Abstain.
Mr. Manfred?
Approve.
Mr. Overly? Here. Mr. Smansky?
Approve.
Mr. Way?
Approve.
Motion carries.
Carries. Moving on.
Mr. Chair, myself in this case. So please.
Okay, we'll call you back in for the conceptual application, I guess. Yep. All right. Chair notes there are 3 members present. All right, new applications. Application number EF 2201-001-501 West Broad Street, Gravity 3 Project. Jessica Shuren, Development, is the applicant, and the property owners Oz2 LLC. Staff report, please.
Okay, so you'll see on the agenda, this application is actually broken out into 5 parts. So I'm gonna just give an overview of the entire project. We can bring the applicant up if that's okay. They have any high-level overview statements. Hold the questions until we get to the individual applications and the back and forth discussion. So we'll do the overview from both of us, and then we'll just jump in and we'll just go down the agenda. So project overview. The applicant is requesting review and approval for the Gravity 3 project located at 501 West Broad Street. The project includes construction of a new 7-story mixed-use building consisting of a 5-story multifamily building above 2 stories of podium parking. The site also includes a leasing and amenity space as well as 2 commercial storefronts. This equates to 313 residential units and 5,360 square foot of retail and commercial space. The new construction proposal assumes the demolition of 3 existing buildings, as well as a lot combination of 4 parcels and city vacation of a north-south alley between May Avenue and McDowell Street. The resulting parcel would be approximately 2 acres. The applicant will have to return for approval of landscaping, lighting, signage, as well as windows and doors. As I said, the submittal includes 5 separate applications and requests for action. A lot combination, demolition of 491 West Broad, 479 West Broad, and 55 McDowell, and then the new construction application. This was heard conceptually at the November 2021 meeting.
As to each, how do we want to handle? I suppose how do we want to handle this?
So I would say if the applicant wants to add anything high level, and then we'll just go, we can do the lot combination and just work down the way they are on the agenda, unless you think it would be better to start with the big one.
Okay. Okay. Identify yourselves, please, on behalf of Conceptual Development.
Jessica Shuren?
And Mike Soriano at Baby J.
Okay. And do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank
Long
you.
time no see.
Long time no see. We missed you a couple months ago. Thank you very much for the time. We appreciate it. We'll try to move sequentially. I think we'll get to a point where the conversations need to kind of happen together, but we'll roll with it. So I'll first talk about the lot combination. It's pretty straightforward. There are 4 lots. They're listed out for you. And now I don't know if this has always happened, but there is like an application specifically for lot combinations. So I see that as a little bit of like checking of the box, paper filing. So
It is.
that's the first one. And then we are requesting demolition of 2 structures. They're technically 3 different addresses on the property. So we have a house at 55 McDowell Street. City agrees, I believe, that it has been significantly altered in time, agrees with the demolition. So I won't go into too much of that unless there's specific questions. And then we have 479 and 491 West Broad Street. So 479 West Broad is on McDowell and Broad, right across from Gravity Phase 2. And then the address that's sandwiched in the middle between the newer building and 479 is 491. And I know we've discussed it a little bit at the last meeting, and I saw the city comments, and for us, we're working to create the best project we can, especially along Broad Street where there's a lot of activity and a lot of focus on the East Franklinton plan. This space, the 479 and 491, just aren't really conducive to modern retail, modern commercial space. It's low ceilings. There is a lot kind of going on in the space in terms of past use. And for us, it was really, how do we make the best project we can? And it was looking at getting rid of those 2 buildings, but keeping the newer building that does have the ceiling heights and would be great to open up, or it is open up and create an activation and a meeting space. And so that is our addressing of those comments, but we're happy to talk more about it. We want to stop there for questions or keep moving to the new construction piece.
Well, let's, we can just work through the staff reports, and I agree, it's probably going to get a little bit convoluted. We just need to make sure that we're keeping it very clear, because they have to be separate actions, because they'll have to be separate COAs. So we may just have to do some clarifying once we get to any motions or voting. So if we look at the lot combination first, I'll just go through my staff report here. We have Morgan kind of sharing the materials if you want to follow along. So the applicant is requesting review and action on the lot combination for the Gravity 3 project located within the West Broad Street subdistrict. It's 4 different parcels. I have the parcel ID numbers listed in the staff report. And then this also assumes the city vacation of the alley between May and McDowell. Let's see. So if the lots are combined and the alley's vacated, it works out to be about a 2-acre site for the development. And the applicant did submit a lot combination plan. As this is part of the larger Gravity 3 submission request for action, this is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. Staff supports the lot combination based on overall general support for the proposed new construction. The plan recommends that developments over 1.5 acres in size include public space such as plazas and courtyards. The plan also recommends that existing street and alley grids be maintained. As such, staff recommends approval for the lot combination, but will recommend that the new construction application be continued to allow for further refinement of the project, including incorporation of that plan recommended publicly accessible open space to activate the street, provide some relief from the large building, and to mitigate the loss of public right-of-way as a result of vacating the alley. As I said, for this one, staff recommends approval with no condition.
Okay, any questions for staff on this? This one's severely non-controversial. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve the application as submitted.
Been moved and seconded to approve this portion of the application as submitted. Roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfres,
Approved.
Mr. Smith.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Application, sub-application A is approved. Let's move on to B.
So this one is for 491 West Broad. It's a demolition request. The applicant is requesting review and action for the demolition of 491 West Broad for the Gravity 3 mixed-use development project. They included a demolition plan as well as existing condition photos. The proposal is somewhat consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends that historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible and if necessary, incorporated into new development. However, staff supports the proposed demolition, understanding that this building may be difficult to adapt and reuse for the proposed use, considering that it is located in the middle of the block. Staff notes that the building is not eligible for local or national historic registers and is supportive of the use that's being proposed to replace it. So as such, this one is also a staff approvable recommendation with no conditions.
Okay, thank you. Can you, one question for staff, can you give us a clearer picture of of this particular building?
Let's see.
Which one is it?
The one in the middle.
Is that one?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not the new one to the west. And it's not
Yeah,
the-
it's, less than full of features. Yeah. All right, any questions for staff? Jessica, you guys have any comments on this one?
Nope.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve as submitted. Call roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Smansky.
Approve.
Motion carries.
Okay. Application B is approved. C,
The second demolition, this one is for 479 West Broad. Skip over the things that are copied from the other one. So this one, the proposal is inconsistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. Citing the same standards that the plan recommends, historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible and if necessary, incorporated into new development. Staff recommends that 479 West Broad be incorporated into the new development as a way to integrate the new project with the existing fabric of West Broad, break up the massing of the larger proposed building. While the building is also not eligible for the local or national historic register, staff does believe that the building could be adapted to function for the new proposed use at the corner of Broad Street and McDowell, rather than being torn down and replaced with similar new construction. The plan notes that older underutilized buildings along West Broad Street are the building blocks of a vibrant loft neighborhood. As such, staff recommends this application be continued until the overall design of the project has been approved.
thank you. Manfred said step out for a minute, we better just hold on.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Obviously, when it's a little bit warmer.
All right, Mr. Manfred has returned, we will continue. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
your turn.
I do want to speak a little to this one. We definitely hear the city's comments on this. What we took into consideration was a couple of different things. If inside that building or those two buildings, they've actually been combined to be one, so they really kind of function as one. They've both undergone a handful of renovations, changes per PCS records. But for us, it kind of echoing what I said earlier, in thinking about how to create, kind of this best in class experience along Broad Street with retail or commercial, the building just isn't there. The ability to adapt it, ceiling heights, building footprint is just not advantageous to what we think is like prime retail and prime commercial space. And what we did was look at the structure in the context of the East Franklinton plan, that it is historic but not eligible for the local register. We looked at the Murphy building demolition, building quite a bit older, And we're looking at, what are the buildings in the area on the Gravity community that we think are really vital to keeping, to help keep this mixture of new and old. And I think we are retaining the Prieto building and the Salaza building at Gravity Phase 2, which I think are really important and really vibrant for the neighborhood. So we've been looking at it holistically in that context.
Staff joined her.
I just realized, did we swear them in?
Yes.
We did.
Yes, it
Okay.
did.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Just wanted to make sure we were good there.
Staff comment on their position.
I mean, I think, I was not here for the conceptual, so I'm not sure what the conversation around this was at the time. Just looking at it from our perspective and what the plan recommends and the use that's proposed to go in this portion of the building, we just felt that this was a good representation of the architecture on Broad Street and that it seemed like the use that was being proposed would fit into the structure, which is why we made the recommendations that we did. And we, to clarify, we were recommending that it be continued, not that it be denied, just until the overall design of the project could be squared.
But, remind me, TJ, we were up. Our discussion was, hey, we'd be willing to entertain that demolition if it was for an overall better project. And I think that's
Okay.
consistent with where I am now and wanted to see the overall project.
So we should.
Jessica, you guys,
We should continue this even if we only take it up in another 20 minutes or something, conceivably. Is that what we're looking at? Yeah, I think we're out of order as much as anything.
Yeah.
All right, I'll entertain a motion here. I'll move it. Chair moves, we continue the application.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to continue. Call roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
approved.
Mr. Smansky.
Approved.
Who was our second on that?
Why?
Okay, so the next one is the last of our demos. It's 55 McDowell Street. This proposal is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community Plan. Plan recommends that historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible and if necessary incorporated into the new development. This building has been heavily modified and at this point is considered neither historic or contributing, so staff supports this demolition, no conditions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Fairly uncontroversial.
That's
Second. Move to approve is submitted and seconded. Roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Smansky.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Now we go to the main event.
Yes. Before we jump into this one, if we could just circle back to the demo that we continued. Were there any conditions or anything that were on that, or were we just continuing it to this conversation?
Continuing it to this conversation.
Okay. That in the minutes.
What's the same presentation you have on your tablets?
Okay, so this is request for new construction. The applicant is requesting review and action on the Gravity 3 mixed-use development located within the West Broad Street subdivision. The development proposal includes a 7-story mixed-use building, primarily consisting of a 5-story multifamily residential building built above 2 stories of podium parking. Integrated within the site is a 2-story leasing and amenity space on the northwest corner of the site at Broad Street and May Avenue. in a building that is already constructed in 2 ground floor retail and commercial storefronts, one on the northeast corner of the site at Broad and McDowell, and the other on the southeast corner of the building on McDowell Street. The proposed building is 85 foot tall. The code allows for 65 feet, so a height modification is being requested. The total counts for the building are 5,360 square foot of retail and commercial. That is an increase of 1,760 square foot from the conceptual review. And then 313 residential units, which is a decrease of 7 units from the conceptual review. The new construction proposal assumes the demolition of 479 and 491 West Broad, as 55 McDowell Street, and the lot combination of 4 parcels in city vacation of the alley. The applicant will return for approval of landscaping, lighting, signage, as well as windows and doors, and they submitted a site plan, floor plans, elevations, renderings, and materials. The proposal is somewhat consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends larger mixed-use development and higher density buildings be adjacent to West Broad Street. Additionally, the plan recommends a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate with a preference for contemporary building design and materials, and that the buildings should include a consistent level of detailing and finish on all 4 sides. The proposal is consistent with these guidelines. However, the plan also recommends that larger buildings should be divided into smaller bays, include vertical elements, and have publicly accessible open space to provide relief and activity at street level. Further, major developments should have bicycle lockers and water facilities. Additionally, the plan recommends that historic buildings be preserved and incorporated into the new development when possible. And lastly, the plan recommends street trees. As such, staff requests the following design modifications: ground floor residential uses to wrap the parking structure, ground floor publicly accessible open space, street trees along all public streets in consultation with the city forester, incorporation of 479 West Broad Street into the design, more vertical relief along the east and west elevations, and consideration of a more robust bicycle lockers and shower or water facilities to be accessible for all gravity residents. Staff is generally supportive of the overall concept, but recommends continuing the application to allow for further refinement of the project and incorporation of recommended design modifications. If the board does choose to approve the application, the board will be approving a height modification to allow an increase of 20 feet from 65 feet to 85 feet. Staff's recommendation is to continue.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? If not, applicant has the floor.
Thank you. We are very excited to come back and return. We got some really great feedback from those of you who are here at, I believe, the November meeting. So we appreciate that. We took that into consideration. You're somewhat familiar with this plan now, so I don't want to spend too much time on the plan necessarily itself. Happy to answer questions, and Mike will also speak to materiality and whatnot. But I do want to touch on a few things that we think are pretty important to the project. We've added the retail along McDowell, near the south end of McDowell. We heard loud and clear that that was really desired at the last meeting, and we're really excited about incorporating it. We're working with a retail consultant, help bring, maybe some new uses to Columbus, or new potential partners. So that's one thing we're working on, which is great. We've also, I think I referenced this last meeting, but we've actually set the building back from the property line 4 to 6 feet on McDowell and May. And the intent there was really to enhance those streets, particularly McDowell, which we know is a really important street in Franklinton. And that's the focus for us will be on the public interaction of that space. So landscaping, benches, public art. We're working on, potentially some projection mapping that has an interactive, like self-guided tour element. So that piece of how does the public interact with this space and where can we provide publicly accessible space? That's what we've been thinking about along this area, and we'll come back for art, and we're going to be coming back for Gravity 2 for art. So that will kind of go along like it would for landscaping, its own application to make sure you're seeing it. The other piece we've been thinking about, and we can come back to it for landscape when we do submit, and I have some imagery here, but we've been looking at how does the southwest portion of the site interact with the housing apartment that is along State and May. And so we've been looking at, can we have like a public little, for lack of a better word, parklet? I know it's not on the street, but a parklet or some sort of green element there that can be accessed by Franklinton community. So that's another thing we've been thinking about. And I do, want to reiterate that we would be asking for a height variance here. And we have materials as well that we can physically show you after Mike sort of presents the materials and aesthetic piece. And that's probably it for my big notes. I think Stephanie did mention that we have a few less units and a little bit less parking, but we know the parking guidelines now and we believe we'll be in compliance. So we're aware of kind of that new process as well. So I can hand it over to Mike if you want to speak to the design.
Sure. So I'm going to focus mainly on the expression and materials portion, but generally speaking, as Jessica was mentioning, just around the kind of refinements that we've been making to some of the massing elements, we feel from a height standpoint that it's relative to what's going on, across the street and at Gravity, just in terms of the overall effect. I think we're doing, trying to do a lot of work with regard to the podium in addressing that lower portion in that pedestrian zone. But also then carving away pieces of the project. You can see from this image at that northwest corner, just trying to really articulate that the building that we're kind of adapting and reusing on the site. We feel, as Jessica mentioned previously, that has some really great elements to it that we think we can integrate into the project really effectively. You can see that we're really trying to elements that people can walk up to, see and touch, really try to create some warmth and depth out of the architectural materials and the overall aesthetic. So this one we're kind of articulating green wall at that corner, as well as some highly visible amenity and attributed to the residential act rate. So we think that from this corner, making that whole entire portion really the focus of some of the livelier portions of the project. And then continuing down Broad, you can see that retail component that we think is appropriate at this for this context, especially along Broad. Jessica mentioned that we're setting back the building on Broad in May, just to give us some space to actually have those balconies hold that edge at the Broad Street right of way. And so we've also been looking at the materiality. So I don't know if we can go to the next image. We think that one of the reasons why we wanted to show this image, so this is looking south on McDowell. Gravity 2 is going to be to page left here. So you'll be right by the office building as you walk down the eastern sidewalk going south. So this is looking back at our building across the way. And one of the things that we've been aiming to look at, and we'll go ahead and show you some of these materials here, is where we're looking at precast concrete in that zone that give us some warmth. So we're looking at a kind of in the buff color region for those balconies as they come down and meet grade. This is a green ceramic tile that we are kind of emulating for that amenity corner. So here up on the podium. So that'll be visible from the street as well. I don't know if I want to start with TJ. And then for the Maywood facade, Mr. Manfus, I know you made mention of materials that look like other materials previously, and that's not necessarily your preference. One of the things I want to point out is relative to the architecture, we're really limited to non-combustible materials. So our palette, given the construction type and what we're dealing with, is, I don't want to say it's limited, but in order to gain the aesthetic that we want to, so in this case, we're really leveraging kind of the depth that you get and the warmth that you get out of a wood product. We're looking at this longboard. So this is a plank example. We're really looking at the sandrift color, but it'll give you a sense of kind of what we're aiming to achieve. And we do think it, especially being where it is on the building, that it'll be really effective in terms of the way it looks and kind of emulating that wood product. We're then breaking it up with several different portions of that rusticated metal panel that has that weathered look. And then as we get to grade, we're really trailing those kind of sneaking balconies that we're using as those vertical elements to pull you down the street as kind of a field condition. Where we get to kind of major portions, either in terms of entry or additional retail, Jessica brought up the idea of wrapping the retail at that southeastern corner, so we've added that as well. We really feel like that starts to create different zones of variation and difference on the elevations that again contribute to the life of the place in the street. One thing referencing, I stand up here, if you don't need us to stand up here, but one thing to point out relative to the aerial is that you can kind of see this phase in relation to the overall build out of Gravity 1 and Gravity 2. And we really feel like this is a building that'll contribute to again that that variation and that like livelihood that we see that has been built up through the first two phases. So I think we're really excited to see how the project punctuates this portion of Broad. You think it's anything?
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, any questions for the applicant?
This stainless steel cable mesh, this is kind of along the McDowell side in front of the parking garage.
It'll actually be on the balconies.
Yeah.
And so the idea there was to have something that would disappear, where you're not quite seeing it. We looked at a few different options that felt was really heavy. We wanted to bring it back to something that was similar to Gravity Phase 1, and pretty simplistic. So it's hard to actually, it does kind of disappear so much that it's hard to even show in the balcony images.
I'd like to reference this, if I could reference this image again. It's probably the most indicative of kind of what we're trying to accomplish. So you can see that architecturally, each of these stacks of units, so if this is a 1-bed or studio or 2-bedroom, that we're really trying to create this ribbon that works vertically down the building. And the goal of that mesh is really to kind of, as Jessica said, recede so that the horizontal and vertical of the ribbon comes forward. And then you get that interplay of in and out as you work your way down the facade.
The wood on the end of that ribbon would be this longboard.
Yes, we're in the midst of determining whether it will be the longboard or whether it's fire treated. But the intent is that it's consistent.
That's something we're working with the building department, just code
wise.
Yeah.
You have the longboard pointed out as some of the things on the first floor. The kind of I think it's around their 2 retail areas. The wood lip plank.
Mm-hmm.
Are those, and those are vertical at the 2 commercial spaces?
Yes, mostly we are on those retail components, and it probably shows up best in the elevation. I think we have a soffit in that zone that has a wood effect to it.
Yep.
And that's where that would come in. Mostly those are going to read, as that stone, or you can see those verticals. Those are really made to kind of match the materials that are the precast that hits at the bottom of the balcony. Really, I think what we are aiming to do with this is really to give it a natural aesthetic. So this has, interplays of things that emulate stone, wood, warmth, and kind of weathered metal, and you can kind of see that we're also trying to draw out with the green. So, yes, the longboard is mostly employed on the field of the elevations, and then in moments in those retail components, just to tie everything together.
I suppose we're a little light on members today, which is unfortunate, but where we're at. And my usual role here is to mediate between a bunch of architects and engineers. As an architect or engineer, I make a really good real estate attorney. So I suppose I'll do the best I can with this and ask you to comment on the staff's requested design modifications. Let's take one. one at a time.
Okay, one quick question on the
Sure, go
lot
ahead.
combination before. There's the lot that's not part, that was part of the lot combination behind on the southwest side. What's the plan for that?
Yeah, so that is the piece we'll come back for landscaping, but I think what we heard last time was that would be a great spot to have some sort of publicly accessible green space, and I know that it's a city comment. And so for us, it will have to house our transformer or generator. There has to be space on the site for that. But we're looking at how can we screen that so that the remainder of the space could either be,
Do you know how big is that space?
I don't have the dimensions on hand. I don't know if our site plan has it dimensioned out.
I mean, it looks like a fairly decent space. I mean, I think that would be important and understand. I mean, it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's kind of left out now how that plays
Yeah.
into the site plan.
Yeah, and to be transparent, I mean, some of that we're still working out, like what is, how many transformers or generators do we need? What is the exact space? But we have put some work into what that could look like. And I think you're right, like it is a fairly good sized space if we were able to do some sort of publicly accessible dog park or just park with some benches. So that is something we're looking at. And if we get to the point where it's like, hey, Jessica and Mike, we're comfortable with this, but it'd be contingent on seeing kind of what develops here or making sure that we have a say. I mean, we want this to be interactive and we want to make sure that we all feel good about it. But just to be fully transparent, we're just not quite there with our landscaping yet and kind of laying out the civil and, MVP pieces that we need to firm up before we can kind of like firm the plan of what that space is. But, we think it's kind of like would be a really good space to be able to have people access.
And that image shows, I mean, pending sizing of the transformer, which I think, is getting there, probably not quite set in stone in the organization of the generator. Softening some of those elements with landscape, but then also carving out as much free area as possible for a little parklet events. Cards.
So we have heard, we heard you all from last time, and we definitely feel it's an important piece as well.
I think stepping the building back a little bit, incorporating the commercial space on the southeast side are big improvements.
Thank you.
The couple things I think that I'd really like to see before, being comfortable kind of weighing in on it and approving anything or even motioning anything would be a kind of a more detailed site plan that shows the exterior from the right of way line to the building, how you plan on using that. I know that's part of what you said you may be back for, but I think that's kind of an important portion of this. The renderings, I think, look really good. The building, for the most part, I don't think I have a whole lot of problems with. We did want to try to engage the middle of the building where your main entrance is, the kind of the core 10 area or the bronzed area, to try to engage that with the public a little more on either side of that. And I know that that's where you've got your bike parking. My biggest concern right now is that back corner space. Your generator for this building is going to be huge and it's going to be loud and it's going to be directly next door to a residential building. And so I think it would need some significant screening. Obviously, you don't want to put it on the roof. I don't know if there's an ability to build out something to house it from a noise standpoint, or if you could carve out a couple of spaces in the parking garage to house it so that it helps with noise. That little area is not that big, and it's going to
Well, I
either
guess
be
I said, now I
outside.
kind of see this on the site plan, and I mean, I know it's still trying to figure out, but just here doesn't really represent what this gets me excited.
Sure.
This
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
look like that. It
it's-
comes even close to being
it's-
able to
Got it.
be a useful space that has trees and it's not going to be ugly, but it's not usable
it's two
space.
small residential lots in Franklinton. It's probably 50 feet wide by 60 feet deep or something along those lines. So that, the generator that's going to be 10 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and 20 feet deep is going to either be sitting outside your residence doors or the neighbors. If the neighbor,
That close to them, it's gonna be a lot of sound.
that's my concern. If the neighbors lose power and your building has power, but they're listening to 70 decibels or 120 decibels of a generator for 8 hours, that would be a terrible way to go without power for 8 or 10 hours. I'd like to try to see if you can make sure that there's a responsible solution to the neighbors for your generator.
I hear you, absolutely. And one thing to clarify on the site plan is what you are seeing there is different than the site plan. The site plan, that is newer, so that has happened since we submitted. So, we're removing the loading zone or we're minimizing it, we've condensed kind of our generator space. We're refining some of that. But I do hear you, TJ, and I think that is something we can look at. I think for us, the challenge here is, we want to make sure we can move ahead. We need some assurance that we can move ahead while we're still developing some of this. So something to think about while we're going through the remainder of these comments is, could we, and Steph, maybe you wouldn't want this or could weigh in, but could we make this approval conditioned on the landscape plan being what you want to see? And if that means we come back really early with the landscape plan, we come back 3 or 4 times with it to make sure it gets correct. Because I think for us, that's where historically we've shown a lot of this development is in that landscape plan.
So I can go ahead and kind of provide kind of high level heading on what teaches it. I mean, I think in general, like the building, the materials don't have any issues. In general, don't have issues with height. The rendering on page 10, and maybe one of the things that would help as you kind of going through is actually understanding what the building renderings do. Being in the visit, renderings do a great job of hiding stuff. And like that, it doesn't seem that there's a driveway there into the garage and the east elevation.
Okay.
And kind of understanding exactly what the material is in the garage, that kind of gives that wavy. And then I look at the other rendering, it's cable wiring, and you're seeing the front ends of cars. And so a little bit more detail. I think adding the retail at the back is great because it ties even further back. I'm not sure from last time if you reduced the retail up front to get more parking. And so I understand it's a trade-off, but some of the things we talked about was, hey, turn that a little bit more. And so when you shrink it a little bit more, we add it, it's an improvement, but I think still trying to turn that more. And I don't know, we have 30 or 28.5-foot depth on that. I mean, that's a really narrow retail. I know you got to find the right retail user, but 30 feet is a very shallow retail depth there. And it seems overall we're trying to make a unit count per parking count work. Some of that drives that. And so I think this is an improvement. But I think to TJ's comments, still would like to see a little bit more detail on the engagement to the street. I think that back part, it's not looking for, hey, this is the exact plan of where a bench is and all that, but some level of commitment that it's a usable space.
Sure.
That it doesn't have to be a half acre. It's not, but that it has some usable space, whether it even be just a dog. I mean, I don't think that has to be usable for a playground or anything like that, but as it's shown now, it's not even really a usable space. And so, I struggle in general just because I understand the struggle of trying to make the project work and the parking and all of that, but it's still, I think that McDowell Street, maybe the more detail of the activating it, and maybe it's, hey, maybe that the entry corridor in the center of the building sits back more and breaks up the building. If I'm reading the plans correctly, it's all in one facade. It looks like you have space to be able to move it back, even if it's a few feet. It makes it read differently. Maybe that's more glass so that it reads like it's a true break in the building. It still feels a little bit like one facade, and I'm not advocating for, not advocate for doing different architectural styles or break, but something that breaks it up even a little bit more could be useful. But I mean, in general, the material, like, I don't have an issue with height. I don't have an issue with density in general. And I think it's an improvement from last time. I think we can just take a few more steps to kind of achieve what we're going for. And I noticed, I think you said this was -7 units from last time. And, you know, maybe it's reducing a little bit more. Maybe, I don't know how your bike parking works out, but maybe that part's set back on the first floor and you can find somewhere else, so you don't need all that bike parking, or some of it moves. I think it's little touches. I'm not saying like it has to be all residential along there to work. I think there's other little things that can be tweaked.
Yeah, all good feedback. And I think the one thing about the retail that we're up against, just for full transparency, is to keep the open garage. We have to have a certain percentage of openings around the building. So that's where that limitation came from. We're confident that between Gravity Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, we have plenty of parking.
Yep.
In fact, I think we're probably overparked now at Gravity Phase 2 with the new rules in place, but we are kind of up against the bare minimum percentage openings, which I think is 40.
I mean, that's an interesting question, and I don't know how it works. Like, can you use some of that parking to reduce it here if it's overparked, and do you guys feel comfortable on that? That makes this, but you know, because I don't think an advocate for necessarily over parking that is that.
Well, I think it's taken out of EFRB, so probably, I don't know how that.
I'm
Pretty
not
well.
even sure what the answer would be. It would be a question for the parking folks that are over the special parking area.
Sure. But just in
That's
terms of
probably
like,
more of an issue, yeah.
yeah, like a practical parking rather than even code, we feel good about what we have. That's the piece that keeps us, you know, limited on the retail. Although we do feel, you know, we've consulted with groups, we feel like we do have a good amount of retail, but I do hear comments about, you know, getting a little bit more detail and then taking another pass at the, you know, how we break up the building a bit.
Yeah, and two, I did want to point out, the retail on Broad is the same size. I don't think anything has shrunk relative to like the amount of street frontage.
And less deep though?
I think it's a teeny bit smaller, a few
Yeah.
hundred square feet smaller. if I
Probably
remember right.
40, but it wraps the corner still at 60.
Okay. And I'm not saying I'm pushing more retail. It's just on usable space.
Mhm.
And yes, I think that's a great point around the amount of recess that we get out of the, on the elevation relative to those breakpoints that, you know, just reinforcing that, I think is a good, you know.
And I'll make an architecture, I don't know if TJ.
And
will agree with it,
it's
but
not
like
shown on and it's not shown on, you know, this first floor plan correctly, really. Some of those things have now stepped back a little
And
bit.
then we're not reflecting.
And
on
they're
the
not
space
reflected
plan.
there.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I meant with kind of an updated site plan is I'd like to see the actual details between where the curb is, the right of way is, your building is, as you're walking down there.
Sure.
You know, to Ryan's point, the renderings all show, as they should, the absolute best images and sides of the building. I would like to see that rendering looking down McDowell, stepping north 50 more feet so that you do see the entrance of the parking garage.
Yeah.
And see what that looks like going in and out of the garage on McDowell.
And I think what you're saying on that site plan, because I can be, we're not saying pick the trees, show exactly where, like, but like more detail of, hey, here's the 5-foot sidewalk, here's how.
Yeah.
kind of-
Yeah,
More
you-
like
on-
the cycle plot.
Do you think like a small like enlargement that gives you the curb edge, you know, back?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that may be, you know, a zoom in on the rendering of the southeast corner with the commercial space of
Sure.
what the minute details are from materials as well as distances. I mean, this one looking down McDowell has a gentleman sitting on one of the planters where it looks like there isn't more than 10 inches from his right foot to the curb where the parking lane is. I want to just kind of make sure that there's not any 48-inch deep pinch points in the pedestrian right of way.
Yeah.
You've stepped the whole building back, which is great.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that there's no areas where the par gets pinched to 48 inches because it'll get really tight when there's people walking up and down.
Got it. And I feel confident that this is information we have and we can show and we'll all feel really good about it. So it's not, necessarily an oversight. It's the piece of the pretty pictures are only showing what pretty pictures show.
I mean, and I think the bike storage, you could do something, I mean, I don't know if that view is the bike storage is only from the inside. Maybe it's the access from the outside, someone's bringing their bike in, and so you treat that front different. Maybe it's not storefront, but maybe it's, some type of different screening that goes there, so it's a secured bike storage, that it feels different. I like I said, I don't think it's big changes. I think it's fine tuning to feel like that space, and maybe that bike steps back a little bit more to create more space there, so it kind of creates that greater public space. You may not need to do that if we get the drawings and it says, hey, it's 20 feet. It's just hard to tell from right now.
Got it.
Your planters across there that hide the parking and hide the headlights of cars, I think is great. I know that Kim would probably say that we want to try to hide headlights and parking cars from the pedestrian walkways on McDowell. What are the things that you guys would like a reassurance for now so that you guys can continue moving forward with your designs and plans? Because I don't have any problem with height. And I don't have any problem with the density. I don't have any problem with the third third demolition.
And that was an important point that I
Yeah.
wanted to bring about. Are we guiding them that we are going to approve the demolition of that one building in application C?
I think so. I think partially why we continued it was to look at this and how the commercial space on that northeast side steps back, and the new front or the old front of the proposed demolished building is 6 feet, further north than this building. So you'd be taking the front off that building, or you'd be using that and losing pedestrian space or possibly seating space for a proposed restaurant. I have no problem with the demolition of the building as part of this building.
And I think to answer your question on the assurance piece, like we want to, just like we have with Gravity One, which I was part of, but Gravity Phase 2, like we want to make this an interactive process where we are talking back and getting the right feedback. And I think you all get it that, like you alluded to, we do need some comfort level that we're moving in the right direction and we're going to get to the right place. So I don't know if there is a way to approve height and density or something like that, that gets us something that we can take back, but we come back with more detail, and then we would ask the approval of that for 79 demolition as well, be our request, but happy to talk to it a little bit more.
Stephanie, do we want to go through all of the boxes that this is requesting approval for, and
TJ, I think doing the demo part I'd be comfortable, the other, it's hard to say just density and height, right? I mean, those, because that's relative to a lot of other things. I think we've done this before, it's like the insurance is that, hey, it's on public record, we've done that, we're kind of saying that we're, good with those things. We're not gonna tell you to come back and say it's 4 stories versus 5 stories. I think those are the commitments. I think the demo is an important one.
Certainly, yeah.
That says, hey, we're good with the lot combination, the demo.
Let's summarize. And I agree, comfortable with demolition. Okay, comfortable with height. I think we have no problem with that. We've got plenty of.
Yeah.
We have enough precedent that that's not going to be an issue. What else are we comfortable with here?
Material generally. I don't know if you're.
Next way.
I'm
I was gonna say-
generally,
Like,
I have no problem with the materials.
Yeah.
Is this one over here, is that the kind of core 10 option?
Yeah, it's a pure freeform panel. We wanted to get, it's not gonna be perforated. We wanted to get a bigger sample. This is really it. I'm sorry, it's bad appearance. We feel really good about it.
Yeah.
I think what we heard your comments too about something like the Core 10 having a lot of issues with rusting and whatnot, but there is some.
Expense.
It's expense. I think it's also the maintenance of it. Cortez really is obviously, it's beautiful. I think maybe finding opportunities if it makes sense relative to some components of it. But I think largely when we're looking at putting panels up on the building, the weight of it, but also the maintenance, we think that is going to look better longer. And I think we can, especially with that product, there are lots of examples of it looking modeled enough that it's not like you're looking at like wallpaper that's repeated. It's something where this has an overall modeled effect on the building that, it looks like weathered metal.
And when you come back, can we see an actual
Install.
install
Yeah,
application?
and we'll work to get a bigger sample.
Because I think that I like the panel. I think it's got good change of color and
Mhm.
movement or whatever architects like to say. But I'm worried that it is not anywhere near that
Mhm.
varied.
Yep, we can definitely do that. We'll try to get a couple different images, but we'll bring in what we can.
And I think we focused mostly on McDowell. I mean, I think there is on the west side of the building, some of that. And one thing I would say explore, I get with the ventilation on the garage, you don't want to have ducting and all that. But there is kind of the intermediate with this garage being as it is, symmetrical, a fan on one side just pulling air, which isn't a huge expense or eyesore, can allow your amount of closed-in space to be different, which may allow you to do some storefront or something at the plate. Like, I would look at that, not just on the McDowell side, but on the side to kind of activate some of that space.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm with you. I have no problem with the Broad Street elevation
Great.
and inside it all. I think it looks great.
Mhm.
The May Alley side, I don't really have a concern with the exception of, I'd like to see a little more, to your point of kind of a little bit of a zoomed in detail of the trash area and how that
Yeah.
works and flows from a pedestrian standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint. And with the exception of kind of a little bit of the detail in McDowell, I'd really like to try to understand where that generator is going, because I think
Yeah.
that's a big deal for the neighbors in the neighborhood. It's gonna be extremely loud if it's not covered, protected, and thought through some sound dampening.
I think we can bring a good time for that. We've, done a couple of different developments now where we've had a few different conditions, so we'll bring something good back. Okay, great. Very helpful feedback.
Okay, any other feedback you're looking for, Jessica?
No, this is very much appreciated. I think I understand my marching orders and where to go next, and we have some assurance. The one thing I would ask is to approve I don't know, I keep missing out the addresses, the 479 demolition, if that's something you're willing to do. I think that gives us essentially the assurance we need.
Do we officially need to close this one out and?
Now, let's close this one out.
Oh.
I need a motion to continue on this one.
Motion to continue.
So moved
Seconded?
and seconded. Call roll, please.
Can we clarify, are there going to be any specific conditions on the continuation that we would note?
Boy, it's almost impossible to say, because we just went through almost another conceptual review here.
Right.
I would say, just return with
More detail.
more detail
plans.
for our discussion, this meeting. That work for you? Okay,
Call roll, Mr. Fergus,
approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Smansky.
Approved.
Okay,
All I have
well,
is,
let's circle back to application C then.
all I have you, can
Yeah.
I ask one question?
Sure.
These are, pretty neat.
Yeah.
Um,
Are they cool?
your design wall here has kind of a whole bunch of different shades and colors.
Uh-huh.
Would that be I mean, these almost look like they're handmade. Would these be multiple colors to get kind of that kind of an idea or?
Yeah, so the thought, and this is a very, this is an initial thought with trying to get something dimensional on that wall is that's a kind of ceramic, Prada or ceramic finish, basically. And so the way that wall is working, it's essentially funny enough, it's just one tile. It just happens to fit together in a lot of different ways. And I think the thought was if we were able to, in combination with the angle and the way the sun is going to hit it, and maybe if we get 2 to 3 colors, that it's going to have that it will have that effect. That's how it's modeled and that's how it's rendered. So,
And we have noted that that's going to be like in theory an art wall. So that would be an art application that comes back, or because we're still exploring it. Like,
Yeah.
Is that code compliant? Can it handle the weight? And then, we're also looking at, would we do a projection piece up there or some sort of interactive art element? But that has been one of the preliminary things we've been exploring is that terracotta panel.
Yeah, that won't be light.
Yeah, no.
It's
Not
really,
anticipated.
it's a beautiful tile.
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry to sidetrack.
We need to circle back to that demo 479.
Okay, chair moves that we approve the application as submitted
Seconded?
and seconded. Roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Smansky.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the comments.
Thank
We
you.
will be back.
Okay, see you next time. All right. What did you do? Okay,
Yep. Thank you.
conceptual applications are next. We have one, and it is EF 2201. Address is 640 West Town Street. The applicant is Art City Development, and the owner is White Cloud Investments. Staff report, please.
We need to grab him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Details. All right, so we are looking at conceptual applications, 640 West Town Street, Art City Development. Really brings in the really heavy stuff.
Right.
Buy it.
Pottery barn rule.
I think it's going to make it first. So I need to be.
Okay, that's fine. Staff report.
So this is 640 West Town. It is a conceptual review. They are looking at some new construction, two demos actually, and a lot combination. The applicant is requesting a conceptual review for a 37-unit apartment building and surface parking lots located within the Dodge Park subdistrict. The project would involve the combination of 4 parcels and the demolition of 2 existing structures, a gas station building, which is at 640 West Town, and a historic single-family home at 641 West Chapel. The current conceptual development plan includes a new 4-story with a partial 5th story, 37-unit apartment building. As presented, there would be a height modification requested going from 35 feet to 53 feet. 2 surface parking lots, and then the combination of 4 parcels, as well as the demolition of the gas station and the single-family home. The submittal includes a conceptual site plan, demolition plan, lot combination plan, floor plans, elevations, and renderings. Staff analysis, the proposal is somewhat consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The applicant is requesting a modification of the height limit to 53 feet from the code allowable 35 feet. Staff supports the height modification as the parcel is located at the corner of 2 primary streets and is in close proximity to State Route 315. But requests that the building and site be redesigned to better align with plan recommendations. Plan recommends that historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible. Staff notes that the proposed demolition of 2 existing structures, the single-family home at 641 West Chapel was built in 1900, and the gas station at 640 West Town was built in 1968. Staff does not support the proposed demolition of the single-family home, as it represents a historic style and pattern of single-family home development along Chapel Street and is eligible for the local register. Staff does support the proposed demolition of the gas station, as that building would be difficult to incorporate into the new development. It doesn't contribute to the existing streetscape and is likely not eligible for the local or national register. The East Franklinton Community District Plan recommends new construction should be integrated with the existing neighborhood, and where buildings are proposed in excess of 3 stories, additional setbacks and design treatments should be employed to mitigate impact. Additionally, first floor residential units should activate the street. And the plan also recommends that parking be located to the rear or side of buildings and screened, as well as the inclusion of street trees. Therefore, staff recommends the following design modifications: preservation and incorporation of the existing single-family home into the project, and provide a design that maintains the overall character of West Chapel Street as a residential street, including hiding the parking from West Chapel Street and South Grub as best as possible. Incorporating parking into the building could be considered by the applicant as one solution. Consider using landscaping, screening, and setbacks as a way to mitigate the impact of the proposed new development on the existing single-family homes on West Chapel. Make ground floor residential units accessible from the public sidewalk to activate the street. Consider the inclusion of street trees along all frontages in consultation with the city forester, and the continuation of the sidewalk along West Chapel Street. Since this is a conceptual review, there is no staff recommendation or conditions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Is this, we had a proposal for this site before. With the houses that fronted the street with the garage doors. So, you want to say? Do you remember that one?
The single house,
There was houses were lined up with, and they had garages. We objected to that. I don't remember if this was the same site.
I don't
No,
think so.
No, not this site.
No, I don't.
Because it wasn't a gas station.
I don't remember us dealing with this particular house. Or any
It
of
looks
those
like
houses.
it's in the area over here.
I was just looking for a clarification if this was something, a new proposal coming in. Oh, it is a new proposal.
Yes.
Right.
All right. The applicant, step forward to be sworn in, please. And state your name for the record, please.
Brian White,
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
yes.
Floor is yours.
Well, I was given some notes here, so although we don't have a final design, but it is going to be something very similar to 750 East Broad Street, which is a cement fiber board with brick on the ground floor and on the stairwells. We do plan to add some trees to screen the properties on the northwest corner. And we tried to buy the additional parcels, but we're not successful, so we can incorporate all the homes into this design. Our curb cut for the parking is on Chapel because we believe we're too close to the intersection of Chapel or Town off the road. We're trying to maximize our parking because of the changes to costs with parking in the area. And we're also talking nearby parking lots and such about a shared parking arrangement. as another solution.
Okay, thank you. Let's open this for discussion. This is conceptual review.
I mean, I'll just go for it, like, from the demolition of the house. I mean, I think I could get behind it if it wasn't for a surface parking lot that fronts on Chapel. I mean, I understand the point, this is an interesting site because you're at Grub and, I mean, it's a prominent, and the building's done a good job, I think, of maybe addressing that corner, but then just putting the big surface parking lot in the back that also fronts on other houses there, I think needs to just totally be rethought on that.
It's tough. You're in the Dodge Park area, which is the residential neighborhood, not the Arts and Innovation District. But you're on Town, which is a bigger street, and you're at the intersection of Town and 315. So you're not in a residential block, I have less concern probably about the height. But there's a lot of things that are not consistent with staff approvals. And maybe we could kind of just run through those and see which ones that are not consistent that we're still okay with, and ones that are not consistent that we might have a hard time getting around, just to give him a better idea of what works and what doesn't. Because I totally agree with you. You're demoing a house that is not of huge value, historically speaking, but you're demoing a house in a residential neighborhood to put a parking lot, and that's never a good feeling.
And it's a small amount of housing that's remaining.
Yeah.
Every bit you take away is reducing what it's supposed to be, but of course.
If this was 3 blocks east, I don't think we have a problem at all because it's in the Arts and Innovation District, but it's in the Dodge Park area, and I think we have to consider that a little more than.
Although historically, we have considered every house demolition carefully, and that there should be some really strong reasons why you would want to demolish it. So.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a building going on there and you could demonstrate that to match with the buildings that are next to it, but I just can't get behind a demo for a surface parking lot. I know it's servicing another building, but that just seems underutilizing that area.
In fact, I think infilling with some of that same scale dwelling, whether it's a single family house or it could be stacked flats or something.
Yeah.
I think to me, that would help to continue to reinforce what the East Franklinton plan is all about in this area. And I think the building that's being proposed on Town, again, it's the consistency. I think staff pointed out that it's just architecturally not consistent with everything else that's going on in this area, although there's flexibility in terms of design. Things look like, and I think if we could, that building could start to be reshaped a little bit and maybe about materials. And I'm not really sure that I have a problem with the height, the additional height, because of 15,
Right.
But I think the parking is going to be the challenge. And one of the thoughts that I had was, can you carve out the ground floor in the back and actually get a 60-foot wide parking lot bay, and then you build over it on the second floor, and that I think you'd get 30 spaces just to get it. And again, I just think that would be a more creative way. So you're infilling on Chapel, you're getting all the parking behind and not to the side, which I think the proposal is parking on the side street.
Maybe pulling in and out, it would essentially be a right in, right out, and left in out of Sandusky into the underside first floor of the building, and possibly parking under the building. Because you wouldn't be able to come out on Town, and you wouldn't be able to come out on Grub because you're too close to intersections, right?
I'm not sure about Grub, it's in the middle of the block, so.
Well, I guess if you came in behind the building, I'm looking kind of at the building. If you came in behind the building off of Grub, you could probably do that.
That's a detail, but I'm just saying that the little parking that's off to the side, you know, that just seems awkward to me. You could get it all in the middle of the block.
in that same footprint.
Yeah,
And again, building over it, there's a challenge there. Maybe that's how we then mitigate. We look at a higher height because you're doing something to parking.
yeah. And if you can park underneath the building and the rest of that block without demoing that house, the house can become an additional rental unit or two.
Well, I would say that you could get some additional rental units there with you, rest of the frontage onto.
If you were gonna build new, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I would have less problem with a surface parking lot going around the house if the house is kept and you're parking around it as part of the project and that house, but to tear down the house for a parking lot is something I don't think we're gonna get around.
and even surrounding it with parking, it's not doing it any justice either. And what it wants to be is a house is running up the street. So somewhere there's an answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the Dodge Park perspective, it would certainly, that street would look much nicer with two infilled houses that match the four that are existing. And then a building on Town Street that's a little bigger that could park itself makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
Some of the other ones here. The density is not consistent, I think. In general, it sounds like, Kim, we're okay with the density, assuming we're not demoing a house and surface parking it.
Yeah, again, the fifth floor is actually townhouses.
Yes,
So I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you have to offset units that you lose in the ground parking, you put them onto the fifth floor where it's units as opposed to townhouses. You get a complete floor. I guess that would be a question. Could we go to 5 complete floors as opposed to 4? In order for them to solve the problem.
So the fourth floor units have second floors to them, right? With walkouts. That's what the townhouse idea means, right? It's a second story
they're just larger units on the fourth floor here.
that are 2 stories tall, that have a second floor.
Some may, yes.
Some,
there's also-
some, just a portion.
Yeah, there's also, as you can see in the blue there, the mechanical, and also, I'm sorry, the gray is the mechanical, and the fitness center is in the light blue.
So the other comment.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want to interrupt the flow. The form of the building materials. I think is fighting the neighborhood. And so, you know, I think there's things you could do even with the roof line and stuff that make it. It's kind of that contrast between a single family, you know, regular, you know, roof, you know, building, and then a contemporary, you know, apartment building. It's either the form of the building, roof, or it's just the materials are maybe more compatible. And maybe it's just the rendering that we're seeing right now. It's not.
Yeah, this was just modeled after 750 East Broad, the Frisbee, that's finished as shown there. But, you know, we'll take everything you guys say into consideration.
So the other thing about that is, you know, there's the Town Street corridor, there's that environment, so there's stuff happening. I'm kind of conflicted between it wanting to be part of Town Street versus wanting to be part of the residential thing. So I think what I'm saying is and I think the staff report has kind of said that there's be some transition.
You're across the street from a flat roof commercial building that Pilot Dogs is. You're 1 or 2 blocks down from an industrial building of Brewdog.
Right.
There are other industrial buildings on town.
So is there a way to somehow mitigate those two languages, right?
I think that the difference of materials that you brought up looking at all of those buildings are all block or brick.
Yeah.
And I think that if this was 2 or 3 stories of brick with maybe a transition to hardy on the upper floors might be a way to
Exactly.
make it feel like it's more massive lower and lighter towards the top,
Yep, and with a little bit more residential kind of feel because of the materials.
possibly even stepping it back on the 4th floor and 5th floor.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of old red brick in the neighborhood, even on town. I agree with your point on the materials. I'd like to.
Yeah, I don't have much to say on that, until you get the building form. It's hard to comment on, for me, on the architecture.
So let's circle back to the existing single-family home. Are there circumstances under which we would support demolition? I'm not taking a position, that's just a question.
I think it depends when it's been just structurally so, bad shape that it's more costly to try to save it than it is to. I'm not sensing that it's
That's basically as long as it's feasible to maintain it, you would
renovate it.
or renovate it.
I mean, it looks like it's not in bad shape, just visually pictures, but
Right.
EJ may know more.
No, that faces to the north, correct? Or does it face Grub?
Faces north.
It lines up with the other 3 buildings, yeah.
Right.
I think if I was to consider demolishing that house, the master plan would have to take into account the 3 houses that are still remaining on that block and work to really bring those so that, on West Chapel, it doesn't look like the back end of a commercial building that surrounds 3 existing single-family homes.
If there was some type of townhome look on that street or something.
So if you replaced it,
Yeah, so if you did 3 townhomes there and demoed that house and did something where you maybe even park under or, drive through and you've got a townhome look on Chapel, I think demoing that house to do something that does not at all look residential in Chapel is going to be really tough.
Question for you as a reference, like how Adelphi did their apartments up front on Long Street. They wrapped around some townhome style units. I forget what the northern street is. Are you familiar with that? Like,
Yeah.
that's similar to what you guys are thinking.
Where there were the townhomes on Monroe that you drive kind of between and yeah, I mean, you could possibly have a drive lane in there and have 4 or 6 townhomes there on Chapel that would open into a parking area that's a little more in the middle. That's possible.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, they don't have to be individual. They could be connected, look different on materials.
Yeah.
I think you have to come back with something that was really unique and special and connected. Chapel Street, demolish that building. Rather than just saving and adding to and then adding additional units. Those are the 2 considerations. And if the new build is really, super cool and fits into that street, okay, but and if there's any issues about renovating, kind of saving that building because it's structural. We've had that where the structure's been so bad, it just wasn't.
Yeah, that it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like it's occupied or has been occupied really recently.
Yeah, those are all rentals.
Yeah. But I think we kind of got an edict that we can't approve demo of an existing house on a residential neighborhood to get the butt end of a commercial property in town. And it's not fair to those neighbors, and
That's exactly how they use it.
So the other thing that I'll throw out there is that, and I looked at them specifically, but those trees that are behind them, existing house. I mean, they could be part of creating something, you know, you think of that block as a development. So frontage on town, this new frontage on Chapel and parking sandwiched in there, I think those trees could still be saved. Could become part of an amenity for that development. It could be, again, kind of crazy, I'm saying. But they stand out, you know, when you see a lot of sites in Franklinton that don't have anything like that. They don't really have amenities. And then you have something that might be worth saving. You know, to me, that's another, like, if you could illustrate saving those trees, you know, that might give us the ability to, you know, think about density and height and stuff differently because you're doing something like that, something to make something unique.
Okay. Any further guidance we can give you?
No, thank you for the feedback.
See you when
Good. Yeah, appreciate your time.
regardless. Good one.
That's a really deep corner. And it is kind of a gateway, so.
Great. We've reached the end here. Our next meeting is Wednesday, February 23rd, 3 p.m. right here. That we stand adjourned.